Well, hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the iHealth channel. But today we also are featured on the Fit and the Fab channel, as well as iHealth Radio, as usual. And we have a different spin, and of course, another different guest with a different topic. And our guest today is a special guest because he's also an author of a book. We've had authors, but he is also a sports person who worked for a few years with the St. Louis Cardinals, and we'll talk about that experience. So our guest is David Meyer, and he is a physical therapist doctor, and obviously that is where his expertise is, and that's where he's been with the Cardinals. And since then, I mean, he's inspired a lot of folks and helped them, through their, I guess, physical fitness, and of course, what happens with fitness typically there's also injury. And so we will talk about all that. So without any further ado, I want to turn it to our dear guest, David here. Dr. David, tell us a little bit about, first of all, yourself, and then a little bit of, your experience, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you so much again for having me on the show. It's great to be on so many different channels of yours and help out and inspire so many different people that experience injuries, both mentally and physically. So it's an honor to be here. And although you're in New Jersey, you're not quite New York. I won't hold that against you too much. And it's great to be here. So thank you so much for that. My background. So by trade, I'm a physical therapist, and I say that tongue in cheek because I've gone quite a bit away from the typical and traditional physical therapist role. I graduated from NYU in 2012 with my doctorate in physical therapy. And my dream was to work in professional baseball. That was the dream growing up as a 5'5.5" player. If you can't play, then the second best dream is to work there, right? So that quickly became the dream. And, I'll never forget, I was in NYU walking through the hallways, and I run shoulder to shoulder with my professor, who was a big mentor of mine, Kevin Weaver. And I asked him, "Hey, professor, how do I work in professional sports?" And he basically looks at me and he says, "Well, maybe you need to know the agents or this, that." And I went on this journey of trying to figure it out and decipher it myself, and eventually achieved my dream to work for the St. Louis Cardinals. And it was there that I realized and discovered that the mental side of injury athletes go through when they kind of experience an injury, or even as a fitness enthusiast, when you're injured and you can't do what you love, it's a big identity crisis. And so we have to find ourselves, and a lot of times it's a mental journey more than a physical journey. And so that's what inspired me to write my book, Injured to Elite.
Well, so certainly, when you were growing up, you said you were obviously an enthusiastic of baseball entirely, and you wanted to play, but that didn't happen. I mean, I guess there's some requirements for height, as you said.
A little bit.
But you still made it, because again, that is a dream come true. And we often, in fitness, we try to keep people motivated about, if you have a goal, set it, go after it, make it work. So, you did set up a goal for you to be part of the baseball world, and you did.
Yeah.
And you've also, I'm sure you've had a lot of, I guess, input and real impact on a lot of those players. Again, as you stated, both mentally and physically. And so we can break it down in two categories, the mental piece and the physical piece. Now,
yes.
There is no physical activity that doesn't come with pain. I don't know if there's any, but I'm pretty sure that, we run, there's some pain there, your knees, whatever. So baseball players, I mean, they go through a lot of, scrutiny, a lot of training.
Yeah, especially this wing of theirs.
I mean, I don't know about those shoulder, what do you call it, rotator cuffs, but
it hurts thinking about it, right?
Trust me. I mean, I don't know if I can do it, and I've not really played baseball, so I don't know how it feels. I mean, I tried to swing a couple of times, didn't work for me. but it's a lot of weight. Yeah, I mean, but also it's physical, and also there's the pressure, right? There's that mental piece. So what do you say to that part? I mean, as a player, how did you handle all that, pressure that these folks have to go through?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the difference working in a physical therapy clinic or your local gym performance center is you're working with recreational athletes, where the stakes are high for that person, but not for every single person around them. In professional baseball, the stakes are very high, especially when you're with the St. Louis Cardinals. They're the Yankees of the National League. So, or at least they were for a while. So you have the front office, you have your fellow athletic trainers, your fellow other rehab professionals and their teammates, and everybody's kind of looking, judging, and watching what's happening every day. Even the cameras as you're walking out onto the field and they see me coming with Carlos Martinez and we're having a catch. And, you know, it is a lot of pressure, and it's a lot of pressure for the clinician. It's a lot of pressure for the athlete themselves, because their career depends on it and their identity depends on it. So when we think of a professional athlete, we think of the sexy part. We think of the Lamborghini. We think of the 3 houses they have. We think of the steak dinners that they're having multiple nights a week. But what we don't realize or think about is this identity that's been built around almost one singular thing, which is performing as an athlete. And what happens when they're injured is that they go through a severe crisis of who the heck am I? And when they go through that, there's different ways athletes cope. Some athletes cope by turning to the negative things, the things that kind of suck them in a bad direction, such as drugs, alcohol, bad relationships, and dangerous behaviors. And then some of the athletes just go through denial. Some athletes go through a point where it's, I can't be injured. I cannot be hurt. This is my life. So I'm superhuman. And what happens with both of those individuals is they really suffer. And so I was doing all the band work with the exercises for the rotator cuff, as you mentioned. And I was doing all the weights and the manual soft tissue work that we all know and love. And there was a point to me, I actually had an athlete and he was sitting on the training room table, and he was a really, really great kid, minor league ball player, signed for a good amount of money. And he wasn't doing so great after his surgery. And he was sitting on the table and he was kind of looking down, and, you do training room banter, you try and uplift the guys. And, I just felt something was off, and I didn't catch it. I didn't catch it fully because I didn't take him in my office and say, "Hey man, what's going on?" And I just kind of brushed it off like he was having a bad day. And later down the line, he was severely depressed, and it ended up being something where he did attempt suicide unsuccessfully, thank God. And it was a point in time I said to myself, I'm never going to miss this again. I'm not going to miss this opportunity to, when the player's there and they're at their worst, I call it, time zero in my book, Injured to Elite, which is actually the initiation of triage in the emergency room. They call it time zero in documentation, or a science experiment. I realized this time zero event for the player is an immense opportunity for me as the clinician, as the PT, or whoever you are out there that's working with an individual, to help them mentally, and to first and foremost ask them, how are you? And number 2, what can we do to make this experience better? Forget about the bands for a second. Forget about the bench press for a second. What's really most important when you're hurt is acknowledging that state that you find yourself in. And so this became my book, the framework of this mental side of rehab. And I now have a mission to essentially change the entire culture, no pressure, Dave, in the entire world of how we view injury. And I think it's picking up a lot of steam. I have a webinar with over 750 students next week. And they're all interested in my journey to the Cardinals and getting their dream job in sports. And I'm building an army. I'm building an army of clinicians behind me that want to change it, want to see a difference in how we treat athletes, how we empower those less fortunate that don't have access to a David Meyer, and also to the athletes that do have access to a David Meyer. What can we do differently to kind of evolve from bodybuilding.com, so to speak, to the modern day and age of where rehab should be?
So what are the steps? I mean, obviously there's a lot of trust factor here, because you're in charge of these folks and their health.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about the steps that will take to get somebody to that level.
Yeah. So in the book, I just giving you a little breakdown of how I do it, because this is essentially the steps. The first section of the book is all about the mind. So I call step 1 acknowledging the state that you're in. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you look into some of the rehab programs out there, such as Alcoholics Anonymous, by no mistake, step one of it is oftentimes awareness. So for me, with an injury, it starts, not that it's an addiction, it's an external event that might have happened, but it's internalized. Step one is acknowledging the state that you're in, meaning what just happened, where am I at, taking inventory, figuring out where you lie, and then step two is taking ownership. So I described step two as taking the driver's seat. There's, the most amazing podcast I heard with Tony Robbins and Yuri Levine, the inventor of the Waze application. And he talks about all his data points. The first iteration of Waze in Tel Aviv was an awful application. All it did is had, showing the traffic patterns of cars in what directions they were going as they tried to figure out the different roads. And I think of that early on in the rehab process of collecting your data points. But the only way you can do that is by taking ownership. If your clinician, your doctor, your surgeon, especially them, if you allow them to have full control, then you collect no data points on your own. You collect no awareness of where you're at. So step two is taking ownership. So those are the first two steps. And then we work more into the vision and the intention and the affirmation steps. You can't, he or she who aims nowhere goes nowhere. So if you don't have a direction, or as you said so perfectly, if you don't have a goal, then it's really tough to have a direction. So then step three becomes, where do you want to go now? Do you want to go back onto the field? Do you want to be the same? Well, if you want to be the same, that's going to be a really tough thing because your tissue is different now. So you either have an opportunity to evolve and grow or to wither away. So the intention should always be focused on growth. And what I discovered was a flexible mindset, or a growth mindset, that Carol Dweck talks about and Angela Duckworth in the book Grit talks about, is the difference maker. I noticed certain athletes went all the way up and they rose to the occasion and they became great through injury. And then the majority of the athletes fizzled out, and we see them. Tiger Woods is a perfect example. We saw him struggle so much after injury. We didn't really appreciate what he was going through mentally until the special came out on HBO. But to see him grow through it and now hitting again and winning championships, that's a growth mindset. So the athletes that succeed have this ability to find adversity as a challenge, to grow and to mold and be on the potter's wheel. So that step three is really important, because that's where we get the negative self-talk. We start having that self-dialogue of, well, I'm never going to be the same. I'm injured. And that's where the affirmation and the I call them a positive thought vaccine. And I swear I wrote this right before COVID, actually. And they're called negative thought viruses by some of my influencers, David Butler and Lorimer Mosley, who wrote a book called Explain Pain. But I thought of this idea with my mentor, John Denny, who is a performance coach. We said, well, what about thought vaccines? What's a thought vaccine? Well, I said, sure. Thought vaccine is an affirmation, an affirmative statement of health. I'm healing. I'm getting stronger. I'm gaining muscle. I'm gaining, through this process. And bodybuilders know this really well. You want to have the mind-body connection, thinking about the muscle as it's working. Well, when you're rehabbing and your ACL is torn, as silly as it sounds, yes, think about the ACL getting stronger. And I had a podcast episode, Dr. Mark Hutchinson out of the University of Adelaide in Australia, who tells me, Dave, as a pain scientist, actually parts of our brain called the glial network, the non-neuronal structures, have a direct impact on our actual blood markers of healing immunity. So those out there that think it's hokey to think about healing, well, guess what? There's actual science and there's actual proof that our thoughts do help fight cancer. Our thoughts do help fight COVID. Our thoughts do help fight an injury. So if you're not doing it yet, now's the time to start thinking about what you're thinking.
So the power of the mind over the body, I mean, it's real, and the impact is tremendous.
Ooh.
Now in your world, you have to deal in two aspects. One, in general, before, so the preventative piece, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're training people, at least you do in the rehab with folks, there's standard stuff that is just to keep them toned and ready.
Sure.
And then you have the, God forbid, an injury happens. Now you have to really get them back in shape.
Yeah.
So how those processes are they very, similar, or are they different, to the extreme?
Oh, they're very different. And most certainly, if you're an elite athlete, you're going to get hurt. It's unfortunate, but it's the oath you take. The Randy Johnson, a pitcher with the Mariners and very successful, always he wrote a quote saying, every pitcher is going to eventually get hurt. So it's just the nature of athletics. And if you're a weightlifter, you're going to have that one injury. Usually, it's on a bench press or a squat, right? And so
Painful.
yeah, it is painful and it's really frustrating because when you have your workout routine and that's your temple, that's your place of worship really for your body, that's a really tough thing. That's really tough not to be able to do what you love, especially when it's good for you. So preventative measures are very different because it has to be individualized. Every single human has some idiosyncrasies about how they move and how they think, and all these things affect their predisposition and propensity for an injury. So you need self-awareness. You need to know where your weaknesses are, and you need to address them to some degree in your program. So if you're going in the gym and doing your 1 rep maxes every single workout, and I know some of you are out there, which I'm not trying to say not to do that, but make sure you're doing some level of accessory movements throughout your week. What are you doing in between your sets of your squat? Are you working on some mobilization and some Kelly Starrett stuff? Are you doing your own type of variation of a corrective exercise? And do you have somebody in your life? In chapter 4, it's 3. It's titled "Building Your Performance Team." Everybody needs a team behind them. Every athlete, you see a boxer go out onto the ring. How many people are behind that boxer? And you're like, who are these people? Well, some of them are hopefully their physical therapists. Some of them are their cut man. Some of them are their agent. And so you need your team. You're a boxer. You're going out on the ring. You need people behind you that are going to teach you and fill in the gaps and where you need to learn. So that's the preventative side. You need a team behind you, and you need to be the leader of that team. But from an injury management standpoint, like you said, again, really spot on. There are a lot of patterns that we see in human beings. And so unfortunately, there's a lot of constraints of healing early on. A lot of people follow a similar trajectory the first few weeks of an injury. I think where it really differs, excuse me, is the 6 weeks out when the standard healing usually occurs, and the differences in the human being's biomechanical, differences, meaning their anatomy. That's when you need, again, that clinician and your own self-awareness of where you're a little bit weaker. We'll take an example. We take a squat. A lot of people have certain spinal posture that create more of a propensity for back pain with squatting. And we think of, we're on YouTube, so I'll explain a little more of a lordotic curve in the lower back. When we back squat, puts more stress on the lower back. Maybe we want to front load the squat in that situation versus backloading the squat. So that comes to the piece of knowing your body. But of course, the initial part of injury is going to have that inflammatory process that is so necessary to actually occur, that we all run away from because we were taught in modern medicine that it's not a good thing, when in fact we were given this superhuman ability to heal through inflammation. And I think if we allow the process to occur a little more, we might find ourselves in better positions.
So a lot of people are afraid to get hurt.
Yeah.
And that's one piece to discuss. And then the other one is that a lot of people, when they're younger, they're not afraid to get hurt. They just don't.
Exactly. Invincible. Superman.
Exactly. So how do we, in your experience, how do you kind of give advice to folks to understand that, yes, you're young, your body is going to be brilliant, but eventually it's going to give, right? And how to avoid that and not be afraid of it.
Yeah, well, there's a quote, for in sports psychology, you don't ever want to tell a race car driver to focus on the wall, or else they're going to hit it. So the idea here is not to be. So there's an image I put in my book that you could see on YouTube here. This is called it's a bell curve of the mind-body sensitivity. And on one side of the bell curve, I look at it as individuals that are undersensitive, or meaning they have they're not listening to their body at all. And then on the opposite side of the bell curve, I look at it as people that are overly and they have a heightened awareness of their body, and they're the ones that are thinking about every little movement that they make. And so the rehab outcome I look at on that left side, the y-axis, bringing me back to my stats classes, and it basically, my findings are, you want to be in the middle. You want to have the Goldilocks approach of just right amount of thought with it. So that's not an easy balance. And that is where the really good athletes separate themselves from some of the athletes that struggle to find their their balance of when is it too much and when is it not enough. And I'm all about incremental progression. So if you're a youth athlete, or let's say you're a parent of a youth athlete, and your son or daughter is 12 years old, and last year they were on one or two teams, and then next year 13th birthday comes and they're on three teams. Are you pushing your child, and are you pushing yourself too many marathons this year, where you just upped that intensity too much, and now your body has no ability to be used to that chronic workload, we call it. So now you have a high acute workload when your chronic workload was much lower. So you want to build this slow and steady over time, and it does start from a young age. And it's almost a high school athlete. If they didn't learn it as an adolescent athlete and a child athlete, they almost already missed the boat. So if you're a parent out there, especially that's a fitness enthusiast, which I know you probably have tons of, make sure that you're getting started at a young age. I work with young athletes too, and I coach them. And I coach them from a mental performance side. And the biggest thing that I teach them is to become Dave Meyer for themselves. I want them to be better than I am to treat them in a year or two. And so the key really is to learn it at a young age. And if you're not at that young age that we all wish we probably had a few more years, then it's never too late to start. And start by getting somebody you can trust that can break it down for you. It could be the trainer at your gym. It could be somebody like myself. It just needs to be somebody that you have a good rapport with, that can give you some pointers of, these are the things that maybe you should give a little attention to in your weekly, and then let it grow from there. Because like you said, I mean, injuries are inevitable, and we all at some point in our career or life are going to push it hard, and we're going to suffer a little bit physically, but it's okay. It's the human experience. So
thank you, Dave. I mean, it's funny you talk about parents and kids and activities. I
have no business doing it. I'm not a parent.
Well, hey, but I'm sure you've come across, folks that may have that. But I had actually an experience recently. My son actually broke his arm, and which is pretty common. But now there's that trauma piece, right? So
yeah.
So it's like, going back in a normal life, everything that was like, we're all afraid, like, he's going to get hurt again.
Sure.
And so I'm sure whether it's an athlete, whoever it is, when someone gets injured, they have that trauma that they almost like trying to give up. That's it. Their life stops. You and your concept changes that mindset, right?
Yeah, it does. It goes into the fear. So we all learned, I have a fear of flying. I don't like flying.
I don't think anybody does, but
I know some people that do, and I don't trust them. It's like people that like it when it's cold. I don't trust them either. But my mother, and that comes from me living in LA and Florida probably for a few years, but my mother was deathly afraid of flying. My father was sick, man. I should mention that I was inspired by all this because he had kidney disease. He had 2 transplants, first one in the 70s, second one in the 2000s. And then a few years later, from the drugs, the immunosuppressives, he developed cancer, and he passed away. Actually, the year the Cardinals and the Mets played the NLCS. And then I worked for the Cardinals, and we grew up Mets fans. So strange story. But my mother never flew because my father couldn't, because he was sick. And we were in New York, so holidays were New York. Washington, D.C. was a heck of a treat, let me tell you. My mother never liked to fly, and she had this fear. And after my father passed away, God willing, she found somebody, and he was a history teacher, and they traveled the world together. And she overcame her fear of flying. And my mother likes to tell me, she's not, she's not the most progressive with everything, but she likes to tell me, David, I was very much about mindfulness back in the day. And I'm like, really? And so even her and a lot of people are very intuitive with, you have to go into the fear. And I can't believe my mother broke through her fear of flying, and she flew literally the world before COVID, to Russia, to South America, to all over. And she did it, I believe, by doing one small thing, going into it. She literally went into the fear. So It's so tough. It's not an easy thing. And I'm not trying to belittle the process, but for your son and for you, for the family and for everybody, you do have to take a second not to. There's a quote that my mentor always says, if you resist, it will persist. So instead of fighting the pain and fighting it and fighting it and pushing it and denying it, take that breath. I call it a reset breath. And we go into it a little bit. And I want to share it with everybody. So the first step is taking a heart-mind focus. Okay, so we have the fear of the fracture in our arm, and we're going to re-break it if we maybe have a baseball catch or shoot a basketball or do some weight training. And you as the parent too has that. And I want you to take a second. We just bring our heart-mind focus. So our mind around our heart. We just work on letting the thoughts pass by it, like Andy Podicone with Headspace talks about, right? Just let the thought pass by, right? Okay, good. So now we're focused on being present. And it's okay if it's a little difficult, but we're just focusing on that with our intention. And then the second step of the reset breath is a really good breath through the nose. So we go in through the nose and out through the mouth. I call it the mouth. and we are blowing the air out through pursed lips like we're blowing a candle out. So let's do it all together. We go. And as we're exhaling, don't say I'm hokey in New York. Don't say I'm hokey in New York. Gratitude. Thank you. This is LA for you guys and girls out here. This is what LA did today. We be grateful. My arm is healing. I'm getting stronger. I'm coming back. It's okay. And it's that simple. It's that simple. If we reprogram our thoughts on a daily basis, guess what's going to happen? It's going to build this muscle, just like our tricep, just like our bicep, and eventually it gets stronger. And sure enough, over time, we break through the resistance and that early struggle we have of feeling like we're in the bottom of the hole. That's where it starts. And it's certainly not easy. And I always get a little bit, last thing I'll say, I get a little bit nervous when somebody asks me, well, Dave, have you had that injury? And I say, no, actually I haven't. So I don't want to belittle what you all might go through or your son goes through. It is scary. It's real. But this is, I believe, and I've seen with my own two eyes, this is the best path forward.
Well, I mean, true. I mean, injury is it's hard because when you have it, it's you. People around you may see it, may see how you're going about it, but they don't feel it. So it's a little different, but understanding the dynamics. Now, we've talked about mind, we've talked about body, but now there is also, is there any nutritional, piece of, for this game? Because I mean, you just can't just get better with exercise and maybe just being focused, but also there's got to be a treatment, something that you have to take. Not necessarily medication, but like even food, to help you heal and get better.
Oh, it is medication. It is absolutely medication. And this is where Eastern practices are picking up steam like we couldn't believe. We need to. Western medicine is ailing. Western medicine is failing. And I think the part through COVID where Western medicine has failed is this piece of nutrition. It's exactly what you're talking about. And that is where nutrition comes into play. We all know about inflammation. We all want to control it. But even beyond that, I think a lot of people want the fancy recommendations that I can give them. I'll give a quick one. So tart cherry juice has a lot of research on it. Tart cherry juice, we all know, has a lot of riboflavins. It's a strong antioxidant, but there's a lot of studies that it decreases post-muscle workout soreness, DOMS. It increases quality sleep. It decreases inflammation. And there's decent studies out there, not just some hokey research article. This is actual scientific peer-reviewed journals that have showed this. So there's things like that out there that, on top of curcumin and turmeric and things like that we want to be aware of instead of just popping the Advils because there's deleterious effects of ibuprofen, of NSAIDs. NSAIDs crush the stomach and the gastrointestinal tract. They're really, really, now hold on, pause. I'm not a physician. I'm a physical therapist. If your doctor is prescribing a medication, you need to have the conversation with him or her. And again, in my book, in one of my chapters titled Conversations with Professionals, it teaches you how to have a more impactful conversation with your physician. So talk to her about your nutrition and about your medications. Don't just take it upon you to make these decisions, because it can be a lot when you trust Dr. Google. But the point I want to make to your population with Fit to Fab is get the fundamentals right. I was a pseudo bodybuilder from the ages of 19 to 24 before PT school gave me something a little more than the gym. And between those years, I was 180 pounds, 8% body fat, and I'm 5'5". So you could imagine my numbers where I was on a bench press, lifting 335 pounds for 2 reps. So I was really, really strong for my size. The biggest thing that built the muscle as a natural bodybuilder, I never took anything beyond creatine, never took any growth hormone or testosterone, which I personally feel very strongly about. But there are indications for it for sure. Get the fundamentals right. If you're not getting your macros down, I'm a believer in some of the basics. If you're not getting your macros down well, then that's going to impact your healing. For instance, ketogenic diets. Look, if you're not giving yourself basic carbohydrates as fuel during rehab, I had a few ball players that were coming in the mornings, and they were on either a keto or they were on a intermittent fasting. And they come into the training room or the PT clinic, and they'd be like, "Yeah, Dave, I'm not eating, so I think I got to get going, and I got to go get my food in at 1:00." And I say to him, I say, "Listen, are you getting the most out of the session with me right now? And are you putting ketosis underneath having an effective rehab session with me? Because then that's a problem. Now we're buying into herd mentality of what you need to be doing, and you just didn't individualize your own program. So come on, man. Come on, let's go. If you're a ball player, you got to do better than that." So I believe that you really need to make sure you're putting your body and your needs first. So get the carbohydrates in, get them from a low glycemic index carbohydrate that's complex. Don't make a blanket statement that you can't put a carbohydrate in your body, because then you're not going to be able to rehab properly. So I look at it that way. I look at it a little more fundamentally, I think.
No, well, I think that's pretty deep advice. I mean, pretty complete, I would say.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, you obviously know what the impact is, and certainly the results will vary, like everything else, right? If you cheat yourself, and cut corners, the results will never be exactly as you expect, right?
Sure.
So it is important to always, make sure, and to your point, in our world, because again, we have the fitness piece.
My favorite piece.
I get a lot of discussion. We get a lot of these questions about, nutrition, diet, this, I need to build a muscle. What do I have to do? Blah, blah, blah. I hurt my back, and it's all about the 3 fundamentals you just mentioned. So mine, the body, and of course, what the intake is. What are you doing to the body?
Yeah.
So David, the book, Injured to Elite.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of you alluded to it, lightly about the concept. Now the title itself, the part that takes you to the elite. Let's talk about that ideology.
Yeah. So this is the cover right here, and for those on the radio, you can't hear, but you can't see that well because I'm sorry. I need a better webcam, but it's at Astoria Park. In Queens, one of my favorite parks. I really wanted the gritty. I wanted the urban element, being a New Yorker from Brooklyn. And it's actually me twice in there. So I'm squared. It's Dave squared cheering himself on. So everybody sees it like, "Oh, that's cool. Someone's running." I'm like, no, that's me. That's me cheering myself on. So the whole idea behind the Injured to Elite is you're taking yourself there. And the guidebook, the book here is your guide that you need to read to guide yourself. It's a guide to empowering yourself to transform your life after injury. So, I was a little weird about the word elite, because at first I'm like, this is a powerful title. And then, I thought about actually my heritage, and I thought about the word elite. And, I come from a Jewish household, and I'm not really the biggest about the word elite, actually, an elitist mentality and elitism. I actually don't like it at all. I'm more about just, being your best self. But the word really means to be your best self as a whole. And I think it's an ever-lasting process of self-actualization. But if I put that in the title, I think a lot of people wouldn't really get it. And so it's a process of self-actualizing. It's the process of finding your higher purpose. And there's no mistake about it that the last chapters in my book are about your higher purpose. So no longer are you just the athlete that is returning back to the field. I want you to feel purpose. When you're back in the gym and you're exercising in this newfound situation you find yourself in, I want you to find a deeper sense of purpose in your career, in your relationships. What changed through this process, and how can you take that change as fuel to better your entire life, to better the people around you? Who are you going to take under your wing to help them when they experience an injury, whether it's mental or physical? So for me, elite is really synonymous with higher purpose. And it's not, it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's not having the biggest muscles. It's not having the washboard abs. It's not having the contract with as an athlete. It's being a human being of service to others and really carrying out the goals in your life and accomplishing them.
That's pretty strong stuff. so
I hope
David,
so.
Oh, it is powerful. So David, you do have a podcast too, right?
Yes, I do. It's called the Injured Too Late Podcast. Very original, Dave. And you could find it where you find your podcasts. And they're starting to pick up steam, the podcast. It's been a real fun journey. I like being on camera, but I really like not being on camera sometimes too, and talking. I love what you have in the backdrop there. That might be next for me, getting something like that. But yeah, the podcast is all about sharing stories of those that have gone on their journeys. I had stories from people that I had a world-renowned DJ Mateo, who was, he was the go-to hip hop DJ in the 90s and 2000s in LA and New York and doing all the big shows, was friends with DJ AM. And then he found himself with a flesh-eating bacterial infection where he lost his leg just going for a swim in Miami. And he still surfs. He still is doing his thing. And so I've had podcasts from that to stories of sexual assault from Division I college volleyball player and her overcoming that and now working on becoming a professional beach volleyball player, and stories of professional athletes like Matt Holliday, Ryan Sheriff, Daniel Bard, one of the biggest comeback stories of the year. And so the podcast is really just about putting the spotlight on other people with that sharing my mentality and the story. So I'm not that quite there yet like you have, and I aspire to get my channels amped up, and 2021 is going to be a big year for me. So I'm excited.
Well, no, you're doing it. Don't ever say that you're not. You're already doing it. And again, from this platform, anybody, please feel free to check out the podcast, listen to it. It's always good. I always say this. Whatever show or talk show or visual or podcast you listen to, you can pick up a few things that you can add to your arsenal of ammo for life, and that can change who you are. And
absolutely
all the energy and the stamina and the fuel for life. And just we're coming to the end of the show, but what would you say to young people right now that are aspiring, just as you were a few years back, and and you did deliver your promise to yourself, and you got to the dream that you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, at 35, if I, where I'm at now, the speed limit on most streets in Long Island. When I look back to the age under, it really started when I was 17, 18. But what I'm going to tell all of you out there that are the youngins, Rudy was my favorite movie. Rocky, Rudy, all those good things. If you have a dream or a vision to be the next surgeon to change the world, or to be a politician, or to be a professional athlete, I'm going to tell you this simple thing. Don't for 1 minute think that it's the skill or it's the genetics that's going to be in the way of that. There are many individuals out there that were just as disadvantaged as I felt, and as disadvantaged as you might feel, to accomplish the impossible. And I can't say it better than Will Smith, right? Will Smith says, if I'm on a treadmill and someone is on that treadmill next to me, either two things are going to happen. Either I'm going to die running on that treadmill, or I'm going to outrun you. If you youngins keep that mentality, all I'm going to tell you is this: it's not maybe going to happen next year. It might not. It might not happen in 5 years. But if you keep the mentality of grit and perseverance and passion, you are going to do every single thing you ever wished to do. I promise you that.
I mean, I cannot top that. that is, I think, the strongest message that, that someone can get, on a morning.
Well, that's it. I did it.
And it could be, they're literally the life-changing, event or quote right now for someone listening to this. So that is powerful. And so with that, I want to, just guide everybody that the book is available, I think, on Amazon, eBay,
Yeah.
and other.
It's just type in Injured to Elite, David Meyer, Injured to Elite. You're gonna find me. Instagram, please check me out, Dave M. Meyer. That's DaveMMeyer. I put a lot of my heart and soul every day putting up good content for all of you, and I think you'll really get a better taste of some of my specific strategies that I give you. So check me out on Instagram. You'll learn all about me. You'll get annoyed with me shortly, I'm sure.
No, it's very powerful stuff. So David, I want to thank you on behalf of the channel, myself, as well as, the audience and listeners. Thank you for the time. And, really, I mean, I'm sure your time is very valuable, and we are on Saturday.
Just a week, just a Saturday with the fiance, enjoying the weekend, the cold weather, get some good breakfast after this.
All right. Well, listen, thank you for joining us and for the valuable advice here. And definitely, check it out. Check out the podcast. Check out the actual book. And again, for the description on David's background as well as his book, please check out the description on the show. Whether YouTube, Facebook, whatever you see this particular broadcast, take a look at it, and then contact David for more. And that's about it. So on behalf of the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio, the Fit and Fab channel, Hurricane H here. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you at the next show. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.
Thank you.